Go ahead.
I was just going to say, let's get started, but you go ahead. What were you going to say?
Okay. No, it was just more about spring. I've been reading all the foundation books that I told you about.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, it's by Liz Bruner, who was a famous, she was famous in Boston anyway. She was a Channel 5 anchor with David Muir.
Hold the book up a little higher.
Okay. A Channel 5 anchor with David Muir. And she worked with some of the same people that were going to acquire my book. I hope when you say these things are recorded, you're careful who you share them with.
Well, they're shared in the group. So if you don't want it to be...
No, but in the group. Okay, go ahead. But if you want to be what?
But if you want to be extra private, then yeah, we should talk outside. But if you're okay with it being shared in the group, then...
Okay, well, I just noticed that the other day, and most of the things I've said so far were pretty generic. I had an old surprise to my former life last week when I was invited to join a PR group in Beverly Hills. They were at the Beverly Hills Film Festival the week before, and I was maybe not going to dress, and I decided to dress. There are cameras around, and boy was I glad I did, because we were on a permanent thing that now goes everywhere. So you have to ask, though, with this new medium, so at any rate, some of the people that were going to offered to acquire my book worked with her.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought it was very, very helpful to kind of see, and they're top notch. I have to say they're really, really good. And so I wanted to see what the finished product looked like. And I was surprised. And I have this problem. Sometimes I do way, way more than I need to. And I was surprised when I looked at the book. I said, that's all they're doing. So that was a big hurdle for me, to realize that this is not an academic mission, but it was a very good book. And then I have, and this one I will be careful about sharing with, I have an invitation to join some groups with some famous women.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been reading their books. And then I'm kind of noticing that just allowing myself to have this process and not be under one of the reasons I also didn't want the acquisition right away was the deadlines were wicked, and I can't keep up with that right now. And then I was taking all these other courses. It's not to say I'm not doing it, but this, so by doing that, another picture is beginning to surface. Has this ever happened to you?
Well, tell me what it is.
Okay. As I'm beginning to, first of all, I'm beginning to realize I belong with these women, and all these titles and things I've had all my life were not jokes. They were honors, and learning to take yourself more seriously, I think is a part of it. And then when you mentioned my genius, that I'm very comfortable in a lot of crowds people aren't comfortable in. And that's for your tape. I'm not being more specific. That's where these women are. So all of that is like something is coming by osmosis, and I'm beginning to frame my thoughts and things in that way, that I'm an elder person in those groups. That make any sense to you?
I think it made some sense. Yeah, well, that sounds great.
Well, I think it was a big breakthrough.
Mm-hmm.
And that especially with some of the younger people, you don't have to worry about writing academic tomes, it's a very different world.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of my big discoveries this week.
Cool. Welcome, Matt. You're in the right place. At least I think you're in the right place.
Yeah, looks like it. Nice to meet you guys.
If you came to talk about book stuff, you're in the right place.
That's my goal.
Cool.
Awesome.
Let's see. Have you been here before, Matt?
I haven't. This is my first time.
Okay, yep. Cool. Where are you based at?
Lehigh, Utah. Currently going to be Dallas, Texas in about a month.
Oh, cool. Well, I know Lehigh well. I know Dallas not quite as well.
Yeah, it's a big place. There's a lot of people, a lot of things going on in DFW. So it's tons of sprawl for sure. So
moving for job stuff, I assume.
More family. I'm a software engineer, and so I can really work from anywhere. And my wife and I used to live out there, and some of her family lives out there. And as we've looked to kind of set roots, the housing prices here in Utah are just kind of insane, and so we felt like, we'll go out to Texas and see what we can find out there. I'm originally from California, and she grew up in Florida, and so we're kind of interested in going to another city. So it should be fun.
Cool. Where are you from in California?
East Bay, Concord is my hometown.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm from Southern, but I have a couple
Okay.
of friends from Concord.
Okay, awesome. That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, it's a good
Cool. What
place.
kind of programming do you do?
So I'm a mobile engineer. I work mainly in React Native is the tech stack, and so I work for Angel Studios. We do The
Yep.
Chosen's one of our shows. So
Yeah. No.
yeah,
Well,
awesome.
that's awesome.
Yeah,
So you can work from
yeah, it's
anywhere?
really fun. Yeah. Well, mostly anywhere. There's a couple. They have some preferences on certain locations, and getting people remote to a new state always takes a little bit of extra work to happen. So Texas is one of the states where they're good with it and with what I'm doing. So
Cool. So if I have issues with the Chosen app, can I complain to you?
you can. Well, there's now the Chosen app. We took over the old Chosen app, made it the Angel app, and then they kind of made their own app. And so if it's the Angel app, I can definitely help you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I know I had an issue. I can't remember what it was. It was something with Chromecast. So I was just like, oh, maybe I can get this fixed.
Yeah. Yeah. We casting is tricky. We actually have a big fix right now that's going to be going out to like upgrade it a little bit. So should
Cool.
be good.
It's funny when you're the user of an app, you're like, this should be so easy to fix. Like, why can't they just fix this thing?
Yeah,
But I know it's often more complicated than that.
yeah, it is. There's always so many factors, and things change sometimes without you realizing something has changed, and you have to kind of figure that out sometimes. And yeah, there's a lot of software is just really complex and tricky. So
Mhm. Cool. Well, Virginia's a regular here. She's based in Massachusetts. I'm in Arizona, and you're in Utah on your way to
Yeah.
Texas. But tell us about why you came to the group today. And by the way, people just come and leave as they please here. They come in and they get some advice and then they go. And so sometimes we have 10 people here. Sometimes we have 2 people here.
Cool.
Whatever it is, it's all good. But tell us why you joined and what you're interested in
Yeah.
doing book-wise.
Yeah, so I kind of have an interesting career path. I studied communications in college, and studied PR. I was a journalist for a year, and then worked in PR for 3-ish years or so. Realized I was working mainly in tech PR, and realized that I wanted to build things and not just like help people get the word out about the things that they're building. And so made a switch, ended up running a coding boot camp for 4 years, and then made the switch to actually becoming a full-time engineer. And so writing has always kind of been in my background. I've always enjoyed writing, and when you're in PR, you have to write a lot. It's like one of the main jobs. And as I made this career transition, I was running a coding boot camp. I helped a lot of people. Part of my responsibility was helping people make that shift into different careers, and that was really rewarding for me. And so I've always felt like it would be fun to kind of write a book about how to make that change, to become an engineer, or to do a kind of mid-career switch. And I think my story, having also kind of I took my own kind of unique path into becoming an engineer, and so yeah, I think I don't know exactly the shape of what I want it to be. I've thought about a bunch of different paths. I think it's been a little daunting to me because engineers are very opinionated and can be very blunt or critical of things. And so if I were to put out a book that touches engineering in any way, there's a lot of confidence I feel like I need to have in making sure that I'm approaching it the right way, and in a way where it won't be rejected off, at its face because of whatever, right? And so, yeah, I think that's kind of got me a little bit of, it's made me a little nervous to kind of make the commitment to go in because I worry about that. And I'm still pretty young. I've been an engineer for a little over 3 years now, and so I also don't want to come into this being like, I know the path, follow my example. That's kind of not, because I still have a lot to learn. But I have a lot of people that I've worked around and worked with, and they've learned their lessons. So in my mind, it's maybe something like compiling a lot of the different kinds of stories and paths that people have taken to make that switch from whatever, from, I know people who were in medical school and became engineers, people who are working at McDonald's and became engineers. I've seen a lot of different things. I know a lot of different people who I could connect with to help tell their stories as well. And so, yeah, I know. I think it could be interesting.
Yeah, and that's a great way when you feel like your experiences might not be everything that's necessary to prevent the criticism or whatever, then interviewing other people's great, because then it's not just you. If they can still criticize your book, of course, but if they're going to criticize what's in it, they have to criticize all the people that you interviewed as well.
Yeah, and they've had their own unique experiences, and so I feel drawn more towards that path, just because I don't want it to appear like I know the keys to how to do this, and there's only one way, right? Like I wouldn't want it to become that. But I do feel like, yeah, I think being able to tap into that would be beneficial, and I think in the end it would be more appealing because there are so many. My whole kind of thing for me is like, I never thought I could be an engineer, like before I learned, because I was a jock. I've never been good at math. Like since 4th grade, I have hated math, and I'm not good at it. So I thought like, oh, you have to be good at math to be an engineer. It was like my first misconception. And then I just didn't feel like I was in that box of what an engineer should look like. But I learned over my career that like there's so many different ways and different kinds of engineers. And actually, the more diversity of background that an engineer brings, a lot of times the more empathy they have for the people they're building the product for, and that can generally make for a better outcome for the product. So yeah. Anyways, that's kind of my thought process so far.
That's cool. Well, it sounds like a great idea. It sounds like you've got unique experience. I mean, going from PR to programming is pretty unique. I don't know anybody else who's done that.
Yeah.
And most of the programmers I know seem to be like, they started out as developers and that's what they've always done. But so it's really interesting to think about all the different developers that have got in perhaps at least what's not the stereotypical way, if it's not the traditional way, but that would be interesting. So is your ideal audience for this, is it people who are considering programming, like they're in some other field and they're considering it, and then that's when they would see your book and say, oh, here's the book that can guide me? Is that kind of where you see it fitting? Or
yeah, I think so. I haven't been able to think too deeply about that part yet. I think until recently I was thinking more about like, would it make sense to make it less about becoming an engineer specifically, and instead of like going into the niche, go more into like, mid-career switching. And I thought about that, and I don't know. It's it's the kind of, do I go niche or do I keep it general? And I'm not super sure yet if I which path would make the most sense. But I think if I do go focus on engineering, then yeah, it would be targeted at people, the kind of people who are thinking, I think I want to do this. Do I go to a coding boot camp? Do I learn on my own? How do I get started with this? Where do I begin? Kind of a thing.
right. Yeah, either way, either of those books could be interesting. Of course, when you have a niche, it's easier to own the niche. When you go general, you have to compete against everybody else who's written a book about mid-career switches. But
And there's a lot. I did a little bit of Googling, and that's what kind of has guided me more towards like maybe I go with this, just because, yeah, I was thinking about like, just brainstorming, like what would the title be if I did write it, like just to kind of help me with the direction. And then I just was Googling, and I was like, there's a lot of books that have been written about mid-career switching, and yeah, so maybe owning the niche would make more sense.
something else to consider is that just because you write one doesn't mean you can never write the other.
That's your point.
So you can choose one, you can focus on that. In fact, just because you start one doesn't mean that you end up with the one that you started either. So you could
Yeah.
start one, and if you get halfway through it and you say, you know what, yeah, I want to switch to the other one, there's no rule against
That's a
that.
really
You
good
can
point.
switch in the middle.
Yeah, I hadn't considered that. That makes a lot of sense.
Sometimes you have to start down a path to realize it's a dead end and that you really want to go the other way.
Yeah, totally.
So the more important thing would be to just do something, choose something and do it.
Yeah.
And at least that way you're making progress and you're getting started. And even if you have to backtrack and go the other way, that's still progress.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
So are you at a point where you're like, I'm ready to start writing, or is there anything holding you back or getting in your way?
There's parts, like I've done a little bit here and there of just like writing my story of how I made the transition. Just because like it's pretty crazy. Like, it's probably the hardest, 2 years of my wife and I's life. Right at the beginning of COVID, had a baby, lost my father, family members diagnosed with cancer, moved across the country twice. Like it was just like kind of a wild experience. So I've
Does sound
done
crazy.
I've written some of that down, because I feel like if I did write this story or write this book, either direction, that story would kind of be what would get people to feel like, oh, I'm drawn to this. Like, what's this person going to say? Like, they went through all this and they've been able to make it out the other end, or at least like they made it towards the other end. You know, let's see what else they have to say. So I feel like that like telling my story would be an important piece of it. So I've written that out. And I think, yeah, for me, it's just a matter of like committing to it. I just finished a side contract that I was working on, and that was always kind of taking up a little bit of my, a lot of my time and brain space. And so now that that's done, I feel like I now have the room to say like I can be consistent with this. And so, yeah, that's where I'm. And then I saw your post on LinkedIn about that you did this, and I was like, I should do that. This it kind of just aligned well with where I'm at right now and what I'm trying to accomplish.
Cool. Did you have a chance to download the workbook yet?
I did. I've been through a little bit of it. I started doing some of the, I think I got like through to the name your fears part of it. And so I've started it, still a lot to go through.
Cool. Yeah, there really is. I've tried to put everything I know into that book. Well, not everything. I'm trying to make it manageable, but
Yeah.
And not pain to get through. But I've tried to make it so that it's easy to get started using the workbook. And so that's a great resource to turn to.
Cool.
And of course, these calls, the way that we do these calls is the first hour we do Q&A and we just talk about what people need, what questions they have, what's holding them back. And then the second hour, we just go to work on our books. So everybody goes on mute, and then we just sit here on Zoom and we work on our books. And it's just a way to
Awesome.
be accountable. And at least if nothing else, you're getting an hour a week in on your book, whether it's outlining or researching or writing, it doesn't matter as long as you're making progress on your book.
That makes sense.
So if you're ready to get started, then please join us every week and we'll help you stay accountable and make progress every week.
Yeah, I think it'll be good.
During the writing, we can also ask questions.
Oh,
Yeah.
Cool.
During that time when we're writing, we can also ask questions.
Yeah.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, are there any questions that you've come across, Matt, that I can help you out with today?
The workbook has been super. I feel like just honestly, just going through the workbook up to that name your fears part has been helpful for me already, just to like to try to solidify more of like, what I'm hoping to get out of this and what I'm afraid of. And so I think at this point I don't have a ton of questions. I think, I think the getting over my own fears, getting out of my own way. I think as a mid-career switcher, I know this is talked about all the time, but like the imposter syndrome, like it is something that that it definitely is part of this, where it's like I feel that, and I'm still, like I said, I'm still learning a ton about what it means to be an engineer and all that. And so yeah, I feel like that's a lot of the fear is coming out and saying like I can write a book on how to become an engineer, even though I'm just 3 years in.
Yeah, it's funny because when you were talking about the career switch, I was thinking in my head, this is what a lot of people say when they think about switching from whatever they're doing to being an author. Not that that's a switch, but it's for people, it's the same thing. It's that imposter syndrome all over again. So for you, you've already been through this, and I guarantee becoming an author is easier than switching from PR to programming. So just tell yourself, I've done this before. I'll just push through and then it'll be fine.
Yeah, that's a good point. By the way, I like PR to programming. I'd never like put that alliteration together, but I actually really like that.
Yeah.
Good.
I've dabbled with both too. I actually have a PR agency, and I got my degree in information systems, so it was half programming, half business stuff.
Yeah.
I learned that I gravitated more towards the business stuff than the programming. I actually loved the programming, but I was in the group with people that were hardcore developers, and I was like, that's not me. I don't like it that much. I'm having fun, but when I saw them working on stuff and getting through stuff so fast, I was like, I would rather come up with the ideas and then have these people implement my ideas than actually sit down and build it myself.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's really interesting because I definitely feel I have similar feelings. I think a big reason why I became an engineer was because I wanted to be able to build what I want to build, and not have to rely on somebody else to be able to build it. But I definitely I definitely wouldn't be surprised if I don't stay an engineer, super long, right? If I make a switch more towards building my own thing or product management or more leadership kind of stuff. But yeah, it's definitely there's definitely, and that's part of it too for me, is I see other people who are like they were born for it, that can be a little bit intimidating, where I definitely do feel like I still have to put a decent amount of effort, but I think it's easier over time. But yeah, it's tricky. It's a hard switch for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Well, great. Well, welcome. We're glad you're here. Hope you come back.
Yeah.
Virginia, did you have anything else you wanted to go over with your book project or where you're at?
I wanted to make a couple of comments, if I could, about some things that I heard, if that's okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And the first thing I wanted to say, what I was trying to describe to you in the beginning, Josh, was just what you said about, I thought I was going into writing my book, and as I do this work, it's changing. That's all I was trying to tell you in the beginning. And if I didn't give myself permission to just go into it without, to just let it happen, that to me was huge. And there is a woman named Louise Hay. I don't know if you've all heard of her, but she founded Hay House, and she never went beyond high school.
Mm-hmm.
And she just got up every day and she did the next right thing. And she sold her company at 85 for $100 million. And what she has to say when people don't like her is, if somebody's not going to like me, I like them to know why. And the other part of the imposter syndrome, another great part, I've been privileged to do a lot of working with some very smart people. And one of them said about the imposter syndrome is that if you think you're an imposter, you're not. A real imposter wouldn't care. They would just keep the con going. So that was really, really helpful to me. And I think it might be to you too.
It's a very
Yeah.
true statement.
And no, that just really helped me a lot with, I'd even get all the academic accolades and things and think like Abraham Lincoln, well, those groups couldn't be too fancy anyway if they're accepting me. I mean, we can do weird things in our head. So it was very, very helpful for me to get that. And then somebody else said, the hardest thing in this world is to be yourself. It's always more convenient for everybody else if you are what they want you to be. And a lot of the really great people, master those obstacles that way. They just be who they, be who you are. And there are going to be people that will like you and people that don't. And I wasted an awful lot of energy trying to people please in my life. So I hope that that's helpful. And then as far as my own book goes, just to give myself permission to do that. I thought I had this idea all in my head. I'm writing about extremely wealthy women who have lost, through self-limiting beliefs, have lost connection with their authentic self. But first, and also I owned 3 PR companies, and I could never even think of being an engineer. I mean, honey, it's the other brain. So I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, good for you. And that also is, I mean, really, that just, and I take risks with that one. Whoa. And so congratulations on doing that. And even in that, taking that risk really makes you stand out, because on the different sides of the brain. So I really, I very much enjoyed your speaking. And I was starting to, and I'm noticing about these classes is that the hardest thing is to get your seat into the seat of the chair. That's Hemingway. And he always would set time from 9 to 11, and whatever happened during that time, he was ready for it. And what he found over time was that he was setting his mind to work at that time. To eventually, it becomes a habit. And so, as I say, those people are all way, out of my league, but I always thought those things were good advice. And I find in the working section of this was, for many, many years, I had 2 speeds, fast and asleep. And there's another speed that's more healthy. And just by taking this hour, I find that I can prepare, and as Josh just said, I can do all kinds of things that are part of the writing. It's not the research, the organizing, and then sometimes the writing. So thanks for listening.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Great thoughts. All right. Well, we're only a half hour into this. Normally we go with Q&A, but when we have 2 people, it's then I'd be asking you for a favor to stretch this out to an hour of Q&A. So we can dive into just working on our book projects, whatever we're doing right now. Or Matt, if you have any more questions, let me know.
Yeah, I might continue with the book, the workbook, and I'm sure things might pop up. I guess one thing that the add author to your LinkedIn title, I feel like that, getting back to the idea of imposter syndrome, I feel like that's something where it's like, I don't know. I feel like, and maybe it's the engineer in me as well, where it's like, am I overextending, what I am right now, or I don't know. Like I'm thinking I've been published, like I've been in Business Insider, I go certain articles in TechCrunch, so it's like I probably should be fine to put author. It just feels a little bit like, I don't know, self-promotional, but I guess I need to be comfortable with that if I'm going to write a book too. So.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe I say this in the workbook, but it's like when you go to the gym and you think everybody's looking at you, and then after a week or 2, you realize nobody cares.
Yeah,
it's kind of the same thing. If you put author on your profile, it means a lot more to you than it does to anybody else.
That's a good point.
You're self-conscious about it. Nobody else cares. Or they'll just be like, oh, cool. I wonder what he wrote. That's it.
I used to worry about what other people thought of me until I realized how seldom they do. They're not thinking of themselves. No, I'm a lot older than you two, so I'm just hearing some things that I've learned. But that was a very important one for me to get. and people's criticism of you is really none of your business, you know, but it takes
Yeah.
a while. No, it takes a while to get there, you
Yeah,
know, but
totally.
everybody has, as I say, everybody that's credible has the imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't say everybody, but many, many people have the imposter syndrome. It's just part of the, you know, part of the process.
Yeah, for sure. Is this your first book, Virginia, or have you written something else before?
No, I've published a short story in an anthology with 10 New York Times bestselling authors,
Oh,
but
cool.
I haven't actually written a book. And then I got to officially at least put author. That was another thing too. I've had several careers, and when you spend any time in academia, that's all the tyranny of the shoulds. You should do this, you should do that, it should be this, all that nonsense. And
Yeah.
so then I've also, as I say, stepped over and gone into business, which was a huge step for me. So I published for the print and broadcast media, and which we all do in PR, and the short story. And I had an offer for a book I was working on that turned out not to work out, but at least I got it to a publisher. And that was, you learn also that all of these are very big steps, and everything is in preparation for things to come. You wouldn't want to do this if you don't have it in you to be able to do it.
Yeah.
It's another tip I picked along the way.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, you can definitely do this.
I appreciate that.
Especially you with your writing background and everything. Like, I've helped authors who can't even type to write books. So you've got a head start on them. Or who only know how to hunt and peck.
Really? Wow, I never heard that. Wow, that's.
Yeah, so anybody can write a book within reason.